Okay. Hello YouTube, it's me, the student witch. Bear with me, I am an idiot when it comes to technology, so I'm kind of practicing with my iMovie application that I have on my computer to learn how to make better quality videos. But for today, I wanted to go over how did I know that I was a witch, or how did I remember, or how did I stumble upon witchcraft, or yeah, what led me to this point, and how did I know it was there all along. And probably a couple times through the video I'm going to be referring back to this book. The cover's not backwards anymore, hooray! The Flame in the Cauldron by Orion Foxwood. Principally because Foxwood's book, The Candle and the Crossroads, was the first book on traditional Appalachian witchcraft and the first book on witchcraft, period, that I ever read. I read it back in December, and it had a huge impact on me, and probably toward the end of this video I'll touch on the reasons for that. But I love his style. I love how he sets everything up. I love the traditions that he works with. He was born and raised in the Appalachian region. He was born with the veil, and he'll go into that if you want to check that out. So he has that traditional background in hoodoo and southern root work and conjuring, but he also has knowledge and has been trained in things like, being a Wiccan priest, or more European styles of traditional witchcraft, and he also does fairy seership. He has workshops on that, which you can check out. So this book and his first book, The Candle and the Crossroads, are essential witchy books in my small but growing library. So how did I know that I was a witch? Let me start off with a quote, just a short quote from his book, because it does have to do with nature. Nature is the ultimate grimoire of witchery, he says. Nature is our original ancestor. And I love that because I think it's a mistake to kind of separate the human from the non-human or nature. We need to remember that we are part of nature. We are nature. Nature is our original ancestor, as Foxwood says in that book. So I had the privilege to grow up in a rural environment. I was born on a military base in Germany, but when I was fairly young, we first moved to Florida, and then we moved to Kentucky when I was about 5.5 or 6 years old. And I lived in Kentucky from 1993 to around 2006 before I left for college. So I grew up, down the street from a pig farm. I grew up in a small town of less than 3,000 people at that time. And I grew up climbing trees, going through the woods, going hunting with my dad. He taught me how to track deer. My dad knew how to hunt deer not only with guns like muzzleloaders and hunting rifles, but also with a bow and arrow. So I grew up in that kind of environment, which I call it a privilege because, for example, my husband, he grew up in a very urban environment in Santiago de Chile, the capital of Chile, the long, skinny country on the Pacific side of South America. And he grew up with the pollution, I mean, rural environments can be polluted too. It's not like they're very pristine. Human degradation has reached all corners of the earth, unfortunately, but I think in an urban environment you have less trees, there's less wildlife, there's less open spaces, and yeah, so growing up in the countryside in Kentucky, it was a privilege. It allowed me to develop a very deep, intimate relationship with the natural world around me. I had emotional relationships with trees, for example, and I still do. I'm just fascinated and I love trees. I might be a tree-hugging hippie, whatever you want to call me, but I fucking love trees. And I love the woods. Particularly the woods in this region, where, you know, the leaves change. I'm not really attracted to evergreen forests or evergreen trees just because I didn't grow up around them. But, you know, the changing of the seasons that you can see in the forest and hiking and going off trail, it's just wonderful. So that was part of my background. Another part of my background was we always had a garden, a vegetable garden. So getting my hands in the dirt was also a key part of growing up and learning how to can vegetables or learning how to grow tomato, potato plants, beans, corn, greens, collard greens, you know, all sorts of stuff. That was, you know, that was the food on our table when those vegetables were in season. So I had that kind of privilege too. So I have some pretty basic gardening knowledge. It's not as deep as my dad's knowledge or my grandfather's knowledge, for example, but it's something, I have a good base, a good foundation. So that helped me kind of develop that connection to the earth, you know, literally getting my hands into the earth and connecting that way. Another part of growing up in a rural part, I don't know about growing up in the city, if this is as big a part of the culture, but pagan-y folklore just permeates the culture. Even though I grew up, you know, in like the Bible Belt, or in a very Protestant, I grew up Catholic, but I was surrounded by, you know, evangelical Protestants, Southern Baptists, you know, you name it. But pagan-ish, pagan-y elements permeated the culture. So, for example, growing up, I was taught, you know, if you see a spider web, I don't know the species name of the spider, but they always have like a thicker part in the middle of their web, and if you find your first initial or your name in the web, it means you're gonna die soon. So it was like an omen kind of thing. Or if you see a ring of mushrooms under a tree, that's a fairy ring. Like those were things I was taught as a child. So looking back, I can, especially this past year, I've been kind of looking back on my life and realizing and taking note of all these memories that I just didn't think twice about, and I realized, oh shit, those were like part of my witchy roots. I also, as a kid, I was always interested in the paranormal, and I wouldn't say I had any overt paranormal experiences because I'm not open in that way. Thank God, I couldn't handle that. But I did hear and see some things that I couldn't explain. And most people would just write that off as, you know, oh, kids are making things up, or oh, kids have an imagination. I'm not so sure. For example, when I was a little kid growing up in that small rural town, I saw something crawl out from underneath my bed, and it was a little green creature thing. Humanoid creature, but it was no bigger than my hand. I don't know if I was dreaming that or if I actually saw that, or maybe it was a little bit of both. So those kind of things happened. And I guess as part of this kind of my family roots / my childhood background in this section of the video, I'll also have to include my birthday. I was born on the winter solstice, December 21st of 1987, and that was a Monday, and it was also the first day of the new moon. So ever since I was a kid, I've always loved my birthday. I kind of hated it because it was close to Christmas and they were so busy with Christmas shopping and shit like that, that my birthday was always, it was never that kind of a big deal like some kids' birthdays are. I never had a huge birthday party or anything. Birthdays were always just a family event where we went to Grandma and Grandpa's house and ate cake, and that was it. But I always loved the fact that my birthday was on or around the winter solstice. The winter solstice is a very important part of the year for me. I love the fact that it represents, death and rebirth. I love that it's the darkest, coldest day of the year in the northern hemisphere. Can't forget in the south, it's actually the summer solstice in the southern hemisphere, which is kind of cool, that duality too. But I kind of see that as like the foundations of my personal witchiness, that I chose to enter into the world on that particular day. And another part of my background, which I'll tie back in probably toward the end of this video. I have a basic outline of what I want to say, so trying to keep this on track. I come from working class, rural white people. My father's side of the family, his father, so my grandfather's side of the family is from Appalachia, from eastern Kentucky, from a very poor rural background. My grandfather was one of 14 children, and he grew up plowing a field behind a mule. And he ran away from home and joined the military, and that's how he got out. He escaped it. He was sent to 2 wars, but he survived. My grandfather, he's about to pass away now, but when he was still conscious and talking, he used to say he joined the military because he was tired of, in his accent, tired of using the mule's ass for a compass, he would say. Because he was stuck behind the mule plowing the fields all day, and he was just tired of it. My dad could not go to college. Neither of my parents went to college. Their only option for a career was to join the military as well. Luckily, they were not sent to any wars because they joined the military in that time period, like after the Vietnam War, but before the Gulf War. And because they specialized in like intelligence stuff, or they were trained in that, they weren't sent to any front lines or anything, which was really good. But yeah, both of my parents, my dad was in the Army, my mom was in the Air Force, because that was their main career option. College was not an option. So even though, my parents, they made a point to make sure that my sister and my lives were better than theirs, and that we had more opportunity than they ever did. I have a strong connection to that working class kind of background. Like I said, my dad's father's family is from Appalachia. My mom's family is from upstate New York. So I kind of joke around, it's white trash in the south and white trash in the north. But, they're strong people and they have their own wisdom and intelligence. I'm not saying that, working class people, I'm not saying you have to go to college to be smart. Definitely not. Actually, I've met some pretty stupid people, even in PhD programs. So, anyway, so that is also part of my background. That's where I find my strength, and that's part of the foundations of my witchiness. Another very important, and the second point that I want to get to is I am an empath. And I'm going to try to remember in the description part of this video, I'm going to put in the link to an excellent YouTube video that one of the witches of the Biophilic Alternative, you should check out that channel, they have really good videos, but one of the witches on that channel put up an excellent video describing what is an empath and what is a sensitive, because all empaths are sensitives, but not all sensitives are empaths. And that helped me when I saw that video, and I did more research, of course, but when I saw that video I realized, holy shit, that's what I've been dealing with my whole life, and finally I have a name for it, and I know how to, like, approach it and build strength with it. Because I was always a crier. I'm a very deeply emotional, deeply intuitive, deeply introverted person in general. And I was always told by various people growing up that I cried too much, or I'm too emotional, I'm too sensitive, I let things get to me. And so I grew up thinking that there was something wrong with me, even to the point to where when I was about 20 years old and I was in college, I thought there was something wrong with me, and I went to the psychiatrist and they prescribed antidepressants, and I took those for about 1.5 years. I didn't notice any change anyway. But then I realized, oh shit, and my husband actually helped me realize this. That's why I'm eternally grateful for him. One of the many reasons why I'm grateful for him. He said, Rachel, but when you cry, after you cry, you feel better. It's just you releasing the negativity. Like, if you need to cry, cry. And actually, your sensitivity and your emotional connection to people and issues is your greatest strength. Like, that's where I get my revolutionary spirit. That's where I get my spirit for trying my best to try to make this world slightly better than when I entered it. So my I guess abilities, I don't know, my openness as an empath is my greatest strength. And I understand that now. And I understand now that there's nothing wrong with me. And this empathic connection, or this sensitivity to not just other people and their emotional state, but also to the outside world, it is part of my witchiness. And yeah, where do I want to go with this? Oh, I have my notes here. One of the signs that I know that I'm an empath, that is, my very first memory is actually when we were still in Germany. Like I said earlier, I was born on the military base about an hour outside of Munich. And at this time there were still 2 Germanys. And my very first memory from when I was about 2.5, and I had to be about 2.5 because by the time I was 3, we had already left Germany and moved back to the United States. So it had to be before the age of 3. My very first memory was we were watching The Little Prince, and there was, like, you know, it's a children's book, but there was a cartoon version back in the 80s, I guess. And there was a scene where the little prince, the character, was all alone on his little planet. And I remember, like, these waves of loneliness and sadness just took over me, and I would have dreams about it. And it was overwhelming. I felt so sad and so lonely and so depressed. And it's kind of a depressing first memory, but it's actually, now that I look back on it, it was me being my empathic self, just picking up on this character. And that was the first of many, many experiences like that. So another thing that if you think you're an empath, or just another thing to check out in general is the Myers-Briggs personality types, which are based on the work of Carl Jung, the psychoanalyst. And he has 16 different personality types, and I'm an INFJ, which means I'm an introverted, intuitive, feeling, judging. So there's 4 different categories, and there's different combinations of each category. That's why there's 16 main personality types, and reading into those personality types also kind of illuminated my understanding of being an empath. So, and developing that understanding to where I understand that being an empath is my strength, and I also need to kind of build control over it and set boundaries and barriers and things like that. So, I think I'm going to stop this now. So this will be part 1 of the video because I'm already at 21 minutes. So this is part 1, and part 2 I will record in a second. So I'll be back.